Welcome to Idea to IPO. My name is Rob. I organize Idea to IPO. We've been doing events in Silicon Valley for many years. We launched officially on February 1st, 2010. At that time, we had no members and no events on our calendar. At this stage, we have over 100,000 members among all our meetup groups all around the world. We've organized, promoted, and produced over 2,383 events. By any standard, by any measure, we're the most active, most prolific startup event organization in the history of Silicon Valley, bar none. We produce venture capital panels, legal workshops, networking events, and more. These days, we're 100% online. We have an event nearly every day of the week. Check out our schedule at ideatoipo.com. At this point, I'm going to hand it off to our distinguished moderator, Roger Royse. Roger, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Rob, and thank you, Idea to IPO, for inviting me to be here to moderate, and thank you to our panelists. Today's topic is Internet of Things, IoT, latest developments and investment in IoT. Before we get to that, I do have a couple of housekeeping items as usual. First is our upcoming schedule. Idea to IPO does a lot of these. I moderate a few of these. I'm going to be on your agenda next Tuesday, September 15. Venture funding in the COVID era. That's another panel. You'll want to tune in for that. Find it on the meetup site. A week after that, 22nd, is doing business in a downturn. We're going to talk about all the things you need to worry about when the economy goes the wrong way. And the week after that, on the 29th, the startup basics. Those are the presentations, and that's another presentation that I'll be handling. But for today, like I say, we've got developments in IoT. Now you notice at the bottom, the way this works is we're going to have a panel discussion for 1 hour. And then at the top of the hour, 1 o'clock Pacific time, I'm going to open it up to questions. If you have questions during the panel, type them in the Q&A box. Don't type them in the chat box. Use the chat box if you've got something you need to tell me immediately. But your questions, put that in the Q&A box. And we'll get to it in an hour, and hopefully we'll try to get to all your questions. This session is being recorded. You can find a recording of this on the Idea to IPO YouTube site. You can also find it on the Royse Law YouTube site probably within a day or two. So, and the last thing is I am your moderator. I'm Roger Royse. I'm a partner with the law firm of Haynes & Boone, an AmLaw 100 law firm. I'm resident in the Palo Alto, California office here in the heart of Silicon Valley. So as I said, our presentation here today, latest developments in IoT and the current state of funding for IoT startups. We have joining us Carolin Funk. She's the investment director at Blue Bear Capital. Sanjt, he's the chairman of U First Capital, and Udit Bhatnagar is associate at MRock Capital. So before we jump into the topic, I guess I'd like to ask each of you to maybe introduce yourself a little better than I did, and tell me how your fund, what your fund's relation is to IoT. Are you industrial? Are you B2C? How you come to the space? And any huge themes that you want to cover today. Carolin, I'm going to start with you.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining during this lunchtime break or wherever you are in the world. My name is Carolin Funk. I am with Blue Bear Capital. We invest in the digital side of the whole energy supply chain. And I'll jump into that a little more in detail. Starting off first to give you the background on me and where I come from. I bring a mix of startup operations experience, having been the COO at two energy-focused storage plus software startups, and large corporate and policy, together with a PhD in automotive engineering back from Germany here to the table. So research, policy, large corporate, startup, and now on the investment side. And everything's overarching in my career in the topic of energy and energy transition. So you'll hear me talk a lot about like how things relate to either the utility space or energy generation, or how we consume energy, which is very much top of mind for all of us here being in California, at least these days. So what do we do at Blue Bear Capital? We look for companies that really tackle the operational challenges of the energy transition. Really the industrialization of renewables, data-driven technologies, with a focus on that industrial scale of everything. The right company for us to invest already has a handful of customers and a product ready to sell, and has a focus on software and data as their growth driver. So trying things back to the IoT space, we do invest in companies that might have a sensor or a connectivity solution, but really focus on the majority of the growth coming from that data that sensor is collecting or the applications on top of that. So that sensor will be need to be more an enabling technology for us to generate revenue. Yeah, and apart from that, we're traditional venture capital. Much of our LP base is from the private equity industry. We try to help companies grow as quickly as possible, and through that network and really make that transition that we're all already living through as quickly and smoothly as possible. So if you're a startup here on the call, feel free to reach out with questions and a Q&A, or also happy to chat afterwards.
Okay, thanks very much, Carolin. Sanjit, how about you?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Roger, and thank you, Rob, for the kind invitation. Is always appreciated. My name is Sanjit Singh Dang. I am based in Silicon Valley in South Bay in Santa Clara, and I am the chairman and co-founder of UFirst Capital. We drive venture capital as a service for corporations. We have over 10 corporations working with us in various capacities, and IoT and AI are common themes for most of the corporations that we work with. For example, Dow DuPont is one of them, and they announced a fund with us for investing in IoT and AI. We create dedicated investment vehicles for each corporation, and that brings strategic returns to them in addition to financial return. Prior to co-creating UFirst Capital, I was at Intel Capital, where I drove investments in IoT and enterprise software for a number of years. Some of the investments in companies I invested into were like Body Labs, which was acquired by Amazon within 2 years of my investment, or DocuSign, which is the e-signatures app that went IPO, or before that Cloudera, which is a Hadoop enterprise software company. So that's what we do, and happy to look at some companies in the IoT and AI space. We are more on industrial side and less on pure consumer side. We believe that there is a lot of value you can create if you focus on the industrial IoT side. And by industrial, I'm using it a little loosely, but I mean anything non-commercial. No, sorry, anything non-consumer. It could be commercial as well. And by way of education, I have an engineering PhD and have been now in Silicon Valley for 20 years. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And Udit, could you tell us a little about yourself?
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you, Rob and Roger, again for inviting me, and very warm welcome to everyone who's dialed in and attending this panel. I'll start with my brief introduction, and I'll talk more about McRock. So my background has been primarily in the technology space. I started my career as a developer and fell in love with software. Somewhere during that journey, I started getting involved with startups. A couple of them I got involved in on the operational side of things as well. And now I'm an investor and part of the investment team at McRock Capital. McRock is a Canadian VC fund, and we were considered as one of the first industrial IoT focused fund worldwide. And we've been looking at the industrial space primarily, and we've had 2 funds in the market currently, and we've invested in wide range of startups, starting from companies focusing on verticals like oil and gas, mining, energy and utility. We also look at smart city startups, and a couple of horizontal tech startups which are touching the IoT stack. And from a stage perspective, we are slightly later stage. We play anywhere between Series A and Series C stage, and partner with startups when they are beyond the initial stage of commercialization. On the LP side, we've partnered with a really strong group of corporate entities who have a significant stake in IoT, and we also have financial institutions backing us. So I would say it's a good mix of LPs who keeps us on the toes in terms of achieving those financial metrics, but at the same time provide a strategic value of partnering with corporates. So that's something which is exciting both for portfolio companies and us as investors as well.
Got it. Well, thank you, panelists. Okay, so now before I jump into some topics to discuss, I think I'd like to find out, I've got questions for the audience. I'd like to find out who's in the audience because it's been long enough that people are now joined, our attendees. So let's launch a poll. Who do we have? Investors, entrepreneurs, industry people, technologists. So far, it's quite heavily, mostly startup entrepreneurs. We've got a few investors, it looks like. Wow, even got some few people from industry, bigger companies. And of course, there's always some service providers like myself. So about 60% voted, and it's 2/3 entrepreneurs. I leave this open just for another couple of seconds. Yeah, we usually get about at least 2/3 entrepreneurs, and that's about what we have now, it looks like. Okay, I'm going to leave this open for 5 more seconds. So pick a category. You know, the other thing about these presentations now, we used to do all of these live, now we do them all online, usually through Zoom. And the result of that is that we have entrepreneurs not just from Silicon Valley where I'm sitting, but from all over the world that participate. So I'm going to end the polling now with 70% voted, and just so you know, it's 65%, 66% are entrepreneurs, 13% are investors, 13% are from larger companies. A quarter of you identify yourselves as being technologists. So interesting. All right, that's a good sample. Here you can see the results if you're interested. So before we get going now, I want to ask you one more question. Like I say, we're all over the world. I'd like to know where you're from. I think that might make a difference in how we present the information. And even though we're online, still most of the people here are from Silicon Valley. Yeah, 80% Silicon Valley. A few of you from other parts of the US, a few of you from Canada or Mexico, Central South America, a few people from Western Europe. We got one person from Eastern Europe, one person from Asia. I guess because of the time zone, we might expect this to be a little bit US centric, although we got a few Europeans, even though it's evening there. Okay, I'm going to leave this open for just a few more seconds. It looks like more than half of the folks here are from Silicon Valley, and 14% from other parts of the country, and the rest of you from all over the world, it looks like. A lot of Western Europe, interestingly. All right, so Okay, and the polling. 50% Silicon Valley, 13% other US, 7% Canada or Mexico, 9% Western Europe, 4% Asia, and then everybody else around the world is from other parts of the world. Okay, now we know who we're talking to. So with that, I want to ask you, our panelists, to tell me a little bit about what it is we're talking about here today. Because when I hear IoT, I conjure up like a pretty big universe of things. So when we say IoT, can you tell me a little bit about what it is and what the hottest areas are for an Internet of Things technology these days? Anybody want to kind of jump in here and set the stage for us?
I can go first. IoT by itself has no meaning. It it depends upon which vertical you look at. So you really have to start by defining IoT in each vertical. When you start talking about industrial, that's one definition of IoT. You start talking of IoT for healthcare or for consumer appliances at home, etc. That's a whole different vertical. And to me, if I look at the IoT technology stack, you need sensors that will collect the data, but more important is the part of the stack around data and analytics. And then how you can apply real-time intelligence on that data to turn that into actionable items. So IoT to me is an ocean of data that can be mined for better use of the human world. And I should even correct myself, it goes beyond human world. We have seen IoT solutions for cattle. We have seen IoT solutions for other pets, etc. So it actually transcends everywhere. And I feel now that given that COVID has happened, unfortunately, human beings are a problem on this planet because human beings can carry the virus, but machines cannot. So I feel that in the next 5 years, you're going to see a much higher deployment of IoT due to disease prevention or spread of a disease once it has occurred, whether it is in the form of automation in industrial IoT, or whether it is in the form of robotics at home. Instead of getting a cleaner at home, you just get the robotic, and I'm not talking of basic iRobot type solutions or other machines helping you. But at the end of the day, the intelligent part of the layer is not going to be the hardware. It is going to be the data engine and then the algorithms on top of it. A lot of these will be AI and ML based likely, but that is the part of the stack where the value will be commanded.
Okay. Carolyn, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, it's sometimes hard in a Zoom meeting to not interrupt, but still signal. But thank you for seeing that, Roger. This is a great overview, Sanjit, and I think the first phrase IoT itself is meaningless is super catchy and very true. I'd just like to add that kind of data transmission layer to it, the connectivity part. I think to me, IoT is basically a connected sensor that should be in some way smart. We can get into that more, what that means, but that also connects to the rest of the world. And in the industrial space, where you might or might not have electricity available to power something, you might or might not have the ability to exchange batteries because things are out in the field. And you might or might not have Wi-Fi or any cellular connectivity, that kind of getting the data out from where it is into the cloud or wherever you want it, your on-premise solution. is an important part of that IoT overall picture. And then we can dive into like what we do with that data. But first of all, we want to connect devices to the internet. And that's kind of it for me in a nutshell.
Okay.
No, absolutely. And I think just to add, because I think both Sanjit and Carolin kind of define what those major pillars are. And I think Sanjit touched upon a point. It's not only humans who are kind of benefiting from IoT. It's beyond that. But I think another important piece is the machine-to-machine communications when we are talking about IoT. It's from a connectivity perspective as well, and how you are kind of making a whole solution kind of talk to each other, how every sensor is speaking to each other, how let's say if it is we are getting to a point where autonomous vehicles are common thing, how two vehicles speak to each other. So I think when we are looking at the solution as a whole, these pillars kind of starting from the sensors to connectivity, to data analytics, which is kind of real value driver currently, to kind of how you orchestrate all of them coming together and generate insight or value for the end user is going to be important. That's what IoT for me is like, once you bring all this together and you kind of solve problems in a way which haven't been solved before, and you're unlocking new business models, unlocking new ways of doing things which are far more efficient. I think that's IoT for me right now.
Yeah, so on that, not only unlocking new business models, but I definitely want to talk about what's different now and what's changed. And Sanjit mentioned COVID, and I've been seeing that and you and I were talking earlier about this, some
Yeah.
technologies are much more interesting now than they probably were a year ago, or even 6 or 7 months. And I know you say you invest in smart city technology.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that particular, because that one sounds just kind of interesting.
Absolutely, no, and with smart city itself, there is a kind of revived interest, or the interest has peaked, rather, I would say, with all this lockdown, because governments now have more and more need to know where the citizens are moving, how mass mobility systems are operating now with all the social distancing measures in place, and a technology like IoT, which not only can track human movement, but also, like I was saying, it can also track vehicle movement, see what congestion spots are. So from a smart city perspective, I think there are a lot many opportunities for startups or established startups already to kind of partner with governments again and look at how they can either position their existing solution to kind of race to the new challenges that we are facing currently. At the same time, I would say on a broader level in the industrial IoT space also, we have to look like, because of this pandemic, we've seen that we don't have to kind of explain automation to customers anymore. We've seen months where there's shortage of labor, shortage of workforce, so automation has kind of stepped up, especially for the industrial customers. So automation as a use case is a lot more understandable by customers, and that's where the opportunities start to unlock now. You don't have to kind of build a business case as hard as you had to do probably last year. Customers know they have to automate. There's no other go to that, and that's kind of helped the sales cycle, especially in the B2B side, which will like I would say longer definitely than the consumer IoT space, to shorten a bit. There's a sense of urgency we've noticed, especially coming from the customers of our portfolio companies, where they are expanding their projects or they are starting new projects, because now the importance of automation is even more clear than it was a couple of months ago.
Any other comments on that, or Carolin or Sanjit, are you involved in that particular vertical yourself?
We're definitely touching up on like the smart city stuff, but yeah, if you're more selling to a large entity, for example, a lot of utilities are trying to incorporate understanding where people are, where they're going to be, what they're going to do and so bring in that data that is generated from those sensors. So yes, for sure, very interesting. And I think with COVID, we're seeing an acceleration in those real problems that are like, if you actually want to have less people out in the field, or the people in the field being in touch with less other coworkers. So increase the efficiency of that. IoT can really help, either with also, I mean, right now I'm showcasing my Berkeley background here on a day where the air is really clear. We have bad air quality. How can we have people be out there and still be safe? Or can we have additional sensors out there collecting data, collecting the information that would happen through people in regular time, but do that in a more automatic way. So we see some acceleration for sure in that space.
You know, that's interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Roger, just to add to what Carolin said, I think given the recent California fires and the subsequent air quality issues in Silicon Valley, we are probably going to see a lot more focus on smart cities now. I feel that the topic of smart cities has been there for a few years now, and so many cities have talked to us about, hey, how do I work with startups, etc., and all that stuff. But nobody is really, very few, but most of them are not really putting budgets into it, I feel. But now, given these new issues, you're probably going to start to see a change in their attitude towards actually looking for IoT solutions for solving these problems. So I feel it's an inflection point in the whole smart city / ESG world, I feel.
So let me ask you the question I was going to ask Carolin, because I guess I've heard both of you now talk about the importance of data and analytics, and especially actionable data. Is the challenge here in smart cities, is it on the sensors and sensor placement and the hardware technology, or is the challenge on the software and analytics, or is it both?
There is a technology challenge, and then there is a business model challenge. The technology challenge is that we have been talking about big data, but that's not really big data when it comes to smart cities and the IoT world, because the scale of data is 1000x or even higher. So you really need to re-architect the whole sensor to the cloud stack for a solution at scale like smart cities, because now you're talking of cameras spitting out video data throughout the day, and then you have other sensors spitting out data. I mean, it's just humongous scale. There is a technology challenge there. Second is the business model challenge. Cities themselves may not have the budget, so they have to go raise funding or get an SI or some other partner, technology partner, infrastructure partner rather, to go deploy these solutions. For the infrastructure partner, there's no money in the sensors. Sensors are going to sell for cents, literally. So the money is in the layer above. But the infrastructure partner may not have the capability himself to do the data analytics part, and hence create the full stack solution. So they partner with somebody else for that. But step one to getting the data is deployment of sensors at scale. And that's where I feel IoT has struggled in getting adoption, because cities are not going to put money by themselves. The infrastructure partner feels, hey, selling a sensor for cents on a dollar is not profitable, and I can't monetize the data. Then you have the Googles and the Cisco, the sector of the world that say, oh, give me the data, but I'm not going to pay for the sensors, by the way. How do you do one without the other? So it has been in this conundrum for a few years.
I will say that I'll counter some of that. I think we already have a lot of sensors out there, but we're not really utilizing them. And just to give you one example, This is a company in our portfolio. They're called Copper Labs, and they turn any meter into a smart meter, be it your electricity, gas, or water meter that the utility usually, either you already have a smart meter, and I don't want to get too technical on this here, then the utility reads out every 15 minutes one data point. They can turn that into like just reading it out more frequently, turning it to couple of seconds for each data point. What usually happens with your gas and water meter, you get a monthly bill. The utility sends out a truck that has a big radio inside and reads out all the one data point from each of the sensors when they drive by. What Copper Labs does is basically reading out this radio signal and sending it to the cloud. So really taking a sensor that we already have, or multiple, your gas, water, electricity, whatever it is, and turning that, like providing that data to the cloud, and then enabling the utility or the homeowner or whoever else it is with that data feed. I think I agree with Sanjit that we're getting stuck on like just taking that that initial needing to bite the bullet and take the initial deployment costs of all these sensors. And with a lot of smart city systems, even the installation is really expensive. You're not just going to install a camera on a building. There's a permitting process. There's all this stuff, or you're not just going to install a new sensor on a transmission line. This takes qualified people to do it, a truck roll to go out there, and the whole monitoring of that installation itself. So can we go about it and find the sensors that we already have and use that data also in a smart way, in addition to installing new things. And then the whole back end of what Sanjit talked about, the business model, the actual like data crunching, machine learning, AI, whatever it is, to turn that data into information is super important.
Thank you, Carolin, for correcting or morphing my thesis into existing sensors and new sensors.
You know, you guys are scaring me. I'm just thinking about the privacy implications of this. All that data could be gathered on energy usage on a home, for example, and upload it. But that's a problem for the lawyers probably more than the technologists. The problem for the technologists will be what's related to privacy, and that's security. And I know, Udit, you've got some background in this, and this is something you're interested in, is the cybersecurity aspects of IoT. Can you talk a little bit about what that is, what the problem is, and what the possible solutions are?
Yeah, sure. And I'll keep my comments from a city perspective as well, because that's what we've been discussing for last few minutes. And taking it one step further, I think that the challenges from a security perspective is also looking at how these, like when you're dealing with something at the scale of cities, and like Sanjit was mentioning, there is one group which might be installing sensors. There is another group, maybe from capability perspective, we need to bring in another vendor who might do analytics. And then somebody else would be doing visualization. Now, when there's so many people involved, so many stakeholders involved, and there is no common standard, or no regulations defined by the city, what your data strategy is, what are the protocols to be followed, that kind of creates a gap in itself. That creates a loophole in the system when you are bringing so many players together. And from a technology perspective, you then create so many points of vulnerability. Now with IoT, we have to understand when we are deploying something, so many sensors at scale, every sensor in itself is a point of vulnerability and can be exploited by a hacker for their own benefits. So I think from that perspective, security definitely becomes a concern. But the solution probably has to come from all the stakeholders, including the city authorities, together, where you define a standard, where you know how you can interoperate between different stakeholders while you kind of maintain the integrity of the entire system. So I think from solution security perspective, the threat is real, and the solution has to be collective. It's not one organization that can probably go out there and solve it for everyone.
So I don't want to spend the whole time on smart cities. It really is fascinating, though, especially what's going on with COVID, with the heat, with the fires, with civil unrest. But I want to talk a little bit about one of my favorite topics, agriculture. I do a lot of work in agriculture. And we expected 2020, or I did anyway, expected 2020 to be the year that we had a rural broadband access bill, you know, a big infrastructure project that would put cell towers all over the countryside. And allowed data to be uploaded in real time from fields. Events intervened, and that money went someplace else. But who knows? I'm expecting 2021. It's still on the table. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has issued a white paper extolling the virtues of rural broadband access. And 2021, we may end up with an FDR-style bill that causes huge public works projects, and this would be close to the top of the list. So I guess I'd like to ask you as investors, am I analyzing this the right way? Are my expectations right? Do we think that there's going to be huge opportunities for IoT in agriculture, not only because of what the technology is doing, but because of what government funding and guarantees might do? Any thoughts on that?
I can start. I totally agree. I look at agtech as a huge sector. I think we have seen already very good adoption of several technologies like computer vision for identifying crop health or for climate prediction. But I think there is room for a lot of automation still in the agriculture sector. And whether it is in harvesting, whether it is in storage, even post-harvesting, how do you store, how do you put temperature sensors in the storage locations and optimize the air, etc., or whether it is for driving the best crop health right from day one. And you should be able to tune your irrigation systems depending upon the data from some of those sensors. So the agriculture is a big sector, and I think it's also ripe for adopting the IoT technologies. We have seen that, and I also feel that there will be some massive acquisitions that will be coming in the next 2-3 years in this sector, because a lot of the traditional players are legacy companies. A lot of the big players are legacy companies without much tech under their umbrella. And as you start to see startups disrupting this, you will see some pretty good acquisitions happening there as well. So I'm quite bullish on that sector.
I think when it comes to AgTech, at least from my perspective, one of the use cases I'm quite excited about is how kind of IoT unlocks the whole traceability of the produce that we are consuming. And I think that's a massive market, and just not only from a consumer's perspective, it's also from across the supply chain in the agriculture industry, and from a whole sector perspective. When it comes to acquisition, I definitely agree with Sanjit. There is a big market out there, and acquisitions are likely to happen. We at McRock, we invested in an AgTech company called Decisive Farming here in Canada, which got acquired last year by one of the largest telecom operators here in Canada called TELUS. So it's not only coming, acquisition is not only a strategy from other players already in the AgTech space. Even the telecom operators, they are looking at industries like these where they can probably have new sorts of business models, sell more data, or have more customers from themselves. I think that strategically unlocks more value for them. So I think from an AgTech perspective, there are multiple use cases, and from an investment perspective, there are some exciting acquisitions on the horizon as well. So yeah, it's an exciting space, and I'll be watching it pretty closely.
Carolin, you look like you wanted to say something again.
Yeah, while we don't invest in agriculture directly, I think there's a lot of connectivity between the supply chain part, being able to track and trace wherever things come from. There's a lot of correlation with our global interest of tracking and understanding CO2 and other emissions. So with that will require a lot of more sensors, because right now there is still a lot of guesswork going on around emissions. And if we want to monetize or penalize whatever's happening, we need to have the right data. And there is the waste to energy side that is, I think, still interesting and becoming more important as we're trying to mitigate kind of landfill or especially also in Europe, be more efficient about use of resources overall, and tracking that. So if it is agricultural waste that we want to know where it is from, what is the quality, what's the moisture content, or whatever you care about, and then kind of create more marketplaces around those, around those residual, I don't want to call it waste, residual goods, if you will. I think agriculture will play an important role in becoming more like that intelligence driver. I don't know how that will actually happen, but I think startups can help a lot doing that and bringing that information to the market. And there are off-takers for those residues for that data. There are off-takers for CO2 certificates, if it's voluntary or mandated. So I think the one side of the market is developing. We need to kind of help the other side to create more of that value.
Yeah, so you mentioned supply chain, and Udit, kind of went there as well. So I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about IoT in the supply chain. Udit mentioned traceability, which is certainly, I can see how there's certainly demand there, and that's important. COVID has really disrupted, the international supply chain. Has kind of messed things up. Maybe it's what Sanjt was saying, we're going to use machines to replace people, and that'll be the big difference. But you tell me, you're the experts, what do you think are going to be the big changes in supply chain that can be enabled by IoT? What technologies and what business models are we going to see emerge, and what would you invest in?
Maybe I take this right away and be really quick to leave room for the others. I think the big question mark is, how are we going to share data? Sharing data in the supply chain, you need to share data across multiple entities. Everybody is very protective of their data. And I think maybe there's going to be a resurgence in the distributed ledger and blockchain space, helping those data streams to be liberated in a way and shared across. Maybe it's other technologies that will enable that. I actually think, especially in the supply chain space, we have the availability of data, not proliferous, but there is a lot we have to agree on how we share that data. And I'd love to see more startups tackling that space.
Yeah, I think I agree with Carolin on supply chain and use of blockchain. IoT sensors can give out the data, but then you should put it on a blockchain to drive consensus and drive automations via smart contracts, etc., between vendors and the customers. So I think supply chain is one vertical where I feel IoT and blockchain can actually be married together for a greater use case. Um, Sharing of data is a very interesting topic you bring up, Carolyn and Roger. Um, I am building a new theory. Earlier, we used to talk about data is a new oil. My new theory is that data is the new venom. And companies that have too much data under their own umbrella are poisoning themselves with data as a venom. And the reason I say that is you can look at Facebook and the whole election saga, etc., and the whole push for data privacy and data protection. We are at a tipping point in the history of software era where if you have data, you have to have a layer for data sharing, data privacy, data protection. Just having data for your own analytics use is actually going to kill you. So I feel there is actually a need for a new consortium for responsible, we call it responsible data or call it mature use of data, etc. But if you don't have that layer under your corporate umbrella or your startup umbrella, you're going to be in trouble. So companies have to share data. They are not there today, but I think over time they will have to get there. It's going to take some time, but that is the era we are headed towards with data. And gone are the days when you could say, hey, I have data and I will make the best products out of it and mint money out of it. I think that model has been shot.
Really? So you wouldn't, you probably wouldn't invest in a pure data analytics company then, I guess is what you're saying. Data is a...
I stopped investing in pure data analytics startups 3 years ago. There were too many of those in, especially just look at Silicon Valley. There were too many of those in the valley. Every street had a big data analytics company that was going nowhere. Number one, it was crowded, and number two, the other reason, the bigger reason why I got to the point of stopping to invest in big data analytics startups is because I felt that over time, the analytics part, the algorithms, will get commoditized and even open sourced. So you as a startup may have a better analytics algorithm today, but 2 years from now, somebody else will have a better algorithm. And at that point, your defensibility is only in data, not in the algorithms. So there's no point in investing in purely analytics companies. You have to be able to create a full use case, full verticalized solution out of it. And also have data under your umbrella. Otherwise, you will not have lasting differentiation as a company. And you look at the world of AI, a lot of the algorithms are open sourced. Kids sitting in a garage, high school kids are building companies using open source AI algorithms. So now go tell me what's the differentiation from an algorithmic standpoint. There's none.
Yeah.
You may be building some incremental algorithm, but that's about it.
You know, it's interesting. We have seen over the last few years companies that have pivoted. Successful data companies have been successful. Some of them, I don't want to name names, but they've pivoted from being data companies to being product companies that just use the data to help them with something else. So you may be onto something there. But enough about what you're not investing in. What are you investing in? What is hot? What haven't I talked about? I've only hit a couple of areas based on what you told me in your introduction. Is there something else in particular that we should focus on here? I'm kind of curious about oil and gas and mining, But what else, what are the other big plays, the big verticals for data, industrial data?
I think one big vertical is general manufacturing. We have invested, for example, in a company that's called Everactive. They are, their core really lies in the efficient use of energy and purely relying on energy harvesting, and then transmitting data to the cloud. And they've gone through very much what Sanjit has mentioned from, well, cool, we have ultra low power radio solution that we're developing here, trying to find customers for that, to really productize the solution for different industrial applications. One, for example, being steam traps, another one being rotating equipment. So really making it easy, having that sensor and the whole kind of backhaul solution plus dashboard for their customers. And now that's really been taking off. So I would say manufacturing in general. I talked more about like energy and utility equipment. We're for sure investing and looking at that space, talking about like additional data solutions that were needed to make more use of the grid that we already have, with power flowing in two directions, from more distributed generation. So just like synchronization of distribution grid stuff. We're constantly looking at the supply chain space. We think that, of course, there is, for example, a much more talk about hydrogen and what's going on there. We'll see that like hydrogen is difficult to handle. So IoT and sensor solutions and that whole hydrogen economy that people are envisioning will be really interesting. I talked about the waste stuff. We're all over those areas. Definitely actively investing and looking.
In addition, just to add to that, I think Carolin kind of outlined some of the overlapping verticals, definitely, that we also look into. But just to go slightly deeper over there, within those verticals, I think one of the themes, especially post-COVID, is that like we are looking at solutions which are either helping us monitor and do predictive or preventive maintenance of critical infrastructure. I think that is any solution which is geared towards that. That's quite exciting right now, because despite the economic downturn, customers, governments are continuing to invest in projects that are around critical infrastructure. And second theme is automation. And it's one side of automation is something that we've been looking at for a very long time, which is through software. I think autonomous system in general, I think that's something which is of interest for us as of now, especially which is also touching verticals like supply chain. If you can bring in autonomous robots, autonomous vehicles, which kind of make an impact, that's going to that's in the next 5 to 10 years going to create a lot of impact over there. Apart from that, autonomy in general, even if you look at the consumer side, that's going to help. Like think about companies like Uber, Lyft. Everyone is thinking about how you can take out human out of the loop, at least given what's happened to their business because of the pandemic. So I think broadly within these all these verticals that all of us have been mentioning, I think autonomy or automation through autonomy and monitoring of critical infrastructure is something that excites me.
Sanjit, did you have any further comments on this?
I think I covered a few topics. I'm always interested in verticalized solutions that leverage data as the strength. And even if as a startup you don't have data differentiation today, you need to be able to show how you will get there over time. Number two, I am interested in a few verticals as well on enterprise/industrial side. Ag tech is one of them, and then other spaces like healthcare and fintech are other spaces I've been interested in as well. So those are the areas we have been looking at. Manufacturing has been of very good interest for us. The question there becomes is how do you bring connectivity and sensification of existing equipment versus revamping the equipment, because that's not going to happen. So those are the areas we have been very interested in.
So we've only got a few minutes left, and I do want to hit, one interesting sort of issue, and that's what's going on in the world right now, especially COVID. Again, fires still, maybe the hot temperatures are over with, and we don't have rolling blackouts where Carolin lives. But are there solutions? Are there ways that IoT can help with all the things that are happening here that we haven't talked about yet? Because we have a group of mostly 66% startup entrepreneurs, and I know that they're looking for problems that they can turn into opportunities, especially given what's going on in the world. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on?
It's a big question. I think we haven't touched much on healthcare, just a little bit, but I think, yeah, the more everybody's looking for more data right now. And I know that Sanjt calls it, has that venom theory. I think in some parts of healthcare, we just are not really tracking enough data and tracking and tracing what's going on around us is an area where I see definitely also from my corporate network interests in investing. So healthcare and energy, finance are definitely areas. If you have applications in those spaces, there's a lot of investment activity going on right now. I talked about, I could go on, and we did a whole session on energy topics a couple of weeks back also with Roger. Maybe go back to that recording where we talk also about solutions that can solve the issue with like rolling blackouts and microgrids and things that are going on right now that are also based on not having the data in place, but not having the right communication channels between the utilities and the consumers, which can be automated at one point. Right now, we're seeing a lot of things happening in a manual way. Hey, folks in the Bay Area, can you use less energy? There's a lot that we could do to automate that, but I don't want to go into much detail on this in the last 2 minutes.
By the way, if anyone has questions, put them in the Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen. We're going to get to them in about 2 minutes. So I cut you off, Udit. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to address, like, if I have to think about what IoT specifically can do, at least in the short term, given the situation we are in, I think a lot of businesses are here in Toronto, in Ontario, the state I'm in right now. A couple of schools, a couple of districts open their schools. So people are getting back to offices, schools are reopening. So in such kind of environment, how you kind of automate the process of, let's say, simple thing as fever detection. Can you place devices at the entry points, access points, collect data on people, and then automate the process of providing access, for example. So there could be various opportunities where entrepreneurs who are thinking about IoT or IoT solutions to kind of, even in the short term, make an impact and help overcome the current challenges. And apart from the short term, even in the long term, if we see, we are just at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the impact that IoT is creating in all of our lives. Like even if you look at the simple consumer devices, a good example would be Apple Watch. It still isn't perfect. You can still iterate it, collect so many data, and use it in so many useful way, and so many applications can be built around that ecosystem. So we are, I would say, still a long way to go, and the impact that IoT can possibly create both in industrial and consumer spaces is a lot more. So yeah, next few years are going to be exciting, an exciting time to be an entrepreneur in this space, exciting to be an investor as well in this space. So looking forward to kind of collaborating with any of the entrepreneurs listening to this panel. If you think you have a solution in the IoT space which is geared towards the industrial customers, happy to connect later on and chat about it.
Okay, well, we're at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and we got a few questions here, and I'm sure more will come in. So let's just go right down the list. Somebody wants to know why we don't use more drones and IoT for fire monitoring. I'm guessing this is someone from California. Anybody want to comment on that? I was kind of wondering about that too. Why are they so hard to fight with all the tech? You can put a man on the moon, but you know.
I think we're using a lot more satellite imagery for like detecting fire ignition, and there are some cool maps out there where you can see kind of microfires that are detected through satellite imagery. I will say, drones, please don't put your drones into those airspaces that are busy being used by firefighters, people who are trying to do the operations around those firefighting. I think drones are used wherever they can be used. They're actually pretty prolific at this stage, but in some airspaces they're creating more harm than actually help.
And by the way,
drones.
go ahead.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think you can even extend the question. Why don't we have more computer vision solutions? Why don't we have better solutions to detect fires and then prevent the spread of fires, etc., versus just poor firefighters going and risking their lives? I think there is a lot of room for improvement there, honestly speaking. The drones should be used. I totally agree with that. Regulations, etc., fine, but we're talking of human lives here, so I think drones can be used. And in fact, you can use solutions for preventing the spread of fire. You can even use drones for computer vision of areas that are at high risk and start putting retardants on those areas as a precautionary measure. There's a lot that can be done, but I don't want to just put it on the government. I think it's on all of us to come up with those solutions.
And by the way, this is being recorded. You can find it on the Idea to IPO YouTube site. You can also find it on Royse Law YouTube page. Okay, next question. It's kind of a long question. This is a company that wants to know whether they should be looking for, I guess, customers or strategic investors or financial investors like venture capitalists. Kind of interesting in this space. Looks like they're industrial. They have remote tracking of heavy equipment to reduce downtime and improve safety. And they're ready for seed money. So this is pretty early. Any advice for this company?
I can take
go
a
to
shot
investors.
at it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go ahead with it. Okay. I was just gonna say. Sorry. I was just gonna say, go to investors who will add value at your stage of the company. And there are investors who are focused on seed, Series A. Then there are investors focused on little later stages. Strategics or corporations are focused on Series A and beyond typically. But there are strategics who are interested in seed as well because they don't want to miss out on early innovation. So you have to find the investor who has the expertise and understanding of your space and can add value at your stage and get you to help you get to the next stage as well. So I won't really think about strategic versus financial VCs at this point. And I would just think of the value in what they have done in your space and do diligence on the investors as well. I'm going beyond the question here, but do diligence on the investors as well. Are they really helpful or not? Talk to their current portfolio company CEOs and ask, hey, do they just show up in the board meeting, or are they rolling up their sleeves and being part of your discussions, etc. as well?
Udit, you wanted to say something?
I think great advice, Sanjit. Again, just from a slightly different perspective on the customer side, because I think the question was, do we go after strategic customers versus investors? I think strategic customers are also important because that's how you kind of expand or scale your business, right? You need to have certain customers who become your reference use case. Even the investors, as you are going from seed to Series A and beyond, everyone wants to see what your commercial traction is. So I think if you're an early stage startup, doing those pilots, showing that technology works, kind of really helps you. And at the same time, if you're looking about investors, I think Sanjit gave you perfect advice in terms of who to look for, who investors who add value. So I think both are important at this stage. Customers and investors, you have to choose between who the right investors are. And for your technology, you definitely need to have some reference customers who can validate this works and then look at commercialization from there on.
Yeah, and sorry I didn't answer the customer part. Thank you for catching that.
So we have a pretty technical question here about edge computing and what is missing in existing edge gateways. And just for the audience, the gateway is kind of, as it suggests, it's an element that connects the sensors at one end, maybe provides some functions and extends the communications to the cloud. Does anybody want to talk about that? I know, Sanjit, you've got some background in software. Any comments?
Yeah, so now IoT edge gateways are quite dumb right now. There is a big opportunity to add compute and intelligence to the edge gateway itself. And it can be more efficient than adding that AI intelligence into every sensor out there. You can have one gateway control a set of sensors, and that gateway is a smart hub for you effectively. I think the biggest problem today is that all of the analytics and model building, most of it happens in the cloud. But you are limited by the bandwidth, the network bandwidth. You can't really send all the images and videos and all the data to the cloud. It's too late. As an example, if I'm a Tesla driving on Highway 101 and I see a bump, I want the Tesla behind me, which is probably 0.2 seconds away from me, also to know, hey, there's a bump coming up. But if my Tesla has to take an image of the bump, send it to the cloud, and then cloud will process it, then the image, then the model gets updated. Oh, there's a bump on 101 at this location, and then sent to the next Tesla. It's too late. So that's where you can drive better edge solutions, more intelligent edge solutions rather. And even to extend that thought, you can drive machine to machine, in this case, car to car communication, bypassing the edge. So I'm a big fan of edge computing in general, but it has to be done right.
Okay. It's kind of an interesting idea. The idea is, do you know any companies that can ensure that the data from an IoT data provider is correct and meets certain standards? You know, we always have this problem of you know, you got to have an oracle, right? You got to have somebody putting the data into the system. And I guess if it's a device, you have less chance for any problems. But have you heard of that? Is that a business? Is that a model that somebody would actually, you know, certify the accuracy of the data? Is it even possible?
Well, I think there are your existing standards bodies. Like if you're an electric metering device, or if you're a standardized measurement device, if you're connected to the cloud or not, still the data that you're measuring can and should be certified. And there are the standard bodies like NIST or UL, or other certification agencies that do that. I might not understand the problem with the IoT data directly. I think the way I read it is that on the IoT side, there's a lot of things that are not trackable or traceable. It's just you get a new data stream that you didn't have before, that's maybe measuring something that nobody did measure before. How do you make sure that this is actually correct? And yeah, that's an interesting question. I know that folks like UL are always on the lookout to certify new types of devices. So they'd be very open to getting into that business even more. I don't know if that's a startup, if that would be a startup business per se. There's a little bit of the Wild West, but I don't know if the startups are the right to kind of take that wild out of the West.
You could use blockchain for data verification, and if multiple parties on a chain certify, yes, this object was this piece of salmon during the supply chain was in cold storage under this temperature level in this location, then you can believe it's correct. I agree with Carolin, you have to have standards and bodies, or standard bodies and other such organizations deal with, but that's going to be it's going to take a long time, and that's why you're probably not seeing that happening. Blockchain is one that comes to my mind for solving this problem. It's a trust problem, and that's where blockchain fundamentally shines at.
Right. Well, this one I think is for Udit. I didn't talk about mining. I didn't think that would be that interesting to our audience, but I was wrong. Someone here is involved on an autonomous robot for mines for safety and health. Udit, what do you think? Is there an opportunity there?
Absolutely. I would say, like, when it comes to autonomous solutions, mining as an industry has been one of the early adopters, I would say. When you look at I would say fleets from big giants like Caterpillar, you would find elements of autonomy already over there. There are a couple of startups who have developed robots which are autonomous, goes deep into the mines. There are drones which are autonomous that fly over the mines, or even inside the mines, collect data and kind of process it. So from a mining perspective, autonomous solutions, customers do have an appetite to kind of look for such solutions. As investors, we also seek technologies which are kind of playing in that segment. Thinking about safety and health itself, so I think like with maybe I'm making too many assumptions over here, but if the technology is to kind of replace human workers inside the mines, or monitor the health and safety of the people inside the mines. Yeah, definitely. I think if I have to think of use cases within the mining space, obviously anything that kind of improves the profitability of the mine is kind of big on agenda. But at the same time, mining customers do definitely care about health and safety within the mining space, given the environment that these individuals work in. That's one of the top use cases for the customers to invest in. So if you're a startup talking about autonomous solutions and health and safety of the workforce, I think that's an attractive space to be, and definitely you should pursue it further.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question. Someone wants to know what you think about the Predix platform, which is a platform developed by GE Digital that provides connectivity processing for industrial applications. Has anybody got any experience or any comments on that at all?
Well, I think
go ahead.
I think the question probably goes into that direction that about 5 years ago, either a lot of investors or a lot of startups that were thinking of starting a company in the IoT space were foreseeing or getting the question that, well, why can't this be solved with GE Predix? Or isn't your business going to be just being crushed by GE Predix? And there's the similar, I worked at Siemens, there's Siemens MindSphere that didn't do the big splash, and ABB has done its own, and Schneider, and all the big corporates tried to get into IoT. GE was probably the most forceful and orchestrated in that approach, and early and splashy, and it just didn't go the way we were all expecting. So I think what this actually is a great point for startups that have grown. Well, GE Predix came and went, and startup companies maybe grew a little slower, but are still out there and are making business success. So I will say, yeah, startups. This shows that just because a corporate understands that there is a problem in a space, puts money behind it, that they'll be the winners.
I totally agree. I think this is actually a classic example of a corporation that has DNA in hardware or hardware-oriented solutions in legacy industries, trying to create new solutions in-house on, hey, how do I drive analytics on top of my sensor solutions? And 90% of times these corporations fail because of several reasons. It's not in their DNA to drive areas of innovation in a whole new sector. Then there are a whole lot of other things that I don't want to get into, but corporations struggle at that quite often. And if you up-level the question, this is the state of most of the Fortune 100 corporations. If you forget the top 10 for a second, a lot of the other Fortune 100 corporations are struggling, and their growth has been stagnant because of this reason. They're all trying to find the next big thing, and they try out these things like GE Predix. I give them kudos for trying out, but that's about it. And that's why they partner with startups like you guys and end up acquiring, because they realize they cannot do it themselves.
And we have an autonomous attendee here commenting, retired GE executive. You can't be everything to all people, he says. Wow.
That's true, and I'll give them kudos to at least shift the focus to solutions like these. Now at least we are looking at startups who are working on solutions like GE Predix. It's on agenda of every big corporate to, if not do something in-house, at least there are lessons learned from GE. Now they are probably more open to kind of partner or collaborate with startups, and that's kind of happened in the recent few years. So yeah, there are certain good things that come out of that. Some good lessons for both startups and corporates, and for us investors, and I think it became a topic of discussion a couple of years back, and now it's kind of mainstream, and everybody is looking to jump on the bandwagon.
Okay, next question. I'm not sure I understand it, but you guys are smarter than me, so I'm sure you probably do. Somebody wants to democratize major industries and sectors and make them more accessible to startups. They haven't been able to access or startups haven't been able to access some of these industries in the past. How do they do that? How do they get into these bigger industries?
You can get into any industry. There's no lock. For a startup, the problem becomes is there is old school thinking in some industries, and hence they are inaccessible to startups. Nobody is denying the access, but they're just not open to adopting solutions from a small startup. Education sector is a prime example. Even healthcare has been blamed for that reason, being behind. If I create an education startup tomorrow, and I hope, let's say K-12 in K-12 space, and I hope I will go to the school board, let's say, I don't know, San Francisco school board as an example, and I hope that they will adopt my new solution. Let's say I have a better way of teaching calculus. Okay, great. But are they ready to adopt my solution or even try it out, give me a pilot? Probably not. So, and in that, using education as a sector example here, teachers' schedule is jam-packed. Schools or school boards or districts have a lot of politics. Some union school board. There's a lot inhibiting innovation in that space, and this is defining the future. I mean, we are educating our kids here. So that is one example, and you can apply this to even countries. US is an early adopter market. As a startup, US and Canada, it's the same thing. The Western world is an early adopter market. As a startup, 3% startup, you can hope to talk to a large corporation like Dell or GE, etc., and they may give you a pilot. You try doing that in Africa or Asia, you don't even get a meeting. So it's a whole different world.
But go ahead.
That, I mean, major industries or sectors, I mean, even it's just doing business in some sense, being protective of that business. Like, I mean, Google doesn't give me access to the data they have about me, or your Tesla example, I can't get access to all that data. I'm not sure that I fully understand the mission with that question. I think the sharing economy and the way we view that a few years back as the solution to a lot of our problems is a little. It's just not playing out the way we or some folks were envisioning then.
But what about the other part of that question, just industry resistance? I mean, again, getting back to agriculture, we've definitely seen that as a limiting factor. Finding farmers that really want to put sensors all over their fields. I guess they're willing to do it now, but you better be able to prove that you've got something that works. Have you seen that in other big industries? We haven't talked about oil and gas, but that's one that comes to mind. Udit, I know you do some business in that space. Is there real resistance to IoT technologies?
So when it comes to the topic of resistance, I think resistance comes when the solution does not understand the problem of the users. So if there is a disconnect between, like, if you're a team of technologists and you don't understand the domain very deeply, you build solutions which you when deploy and hope that your users love, it falls flat face. So I think that's one challenge. Other could be if there is a technology which is so good that it starts appearing as a threat to people on the ground, then there is resistance to adoption. But I think that between these two extremes, there is always a sweet spot where you kind of work collaboratively with people on the ground, understand the domain and tackle the low-hanging fruits initially, and then start going deeper into the problem set from a domain perspective. That's when you build, at least in the vertical market, build solutions which stick and which face least path to resistance. In terms of oil and gas specifically, I think the industry has been has been looking at technology, especially on the inspection side, also on predictive technologies, are also on the asset optimization side. So I think there are a couple of use cases where oil and gas industry has customers have definitely invested and are continuing to do so. But apart from that, there are so many other areas within the oil and gas space where further innovation can be done. So I think it's like I said earlier when we were doing the panel discussion, it's just beginning to kind of change the landscape in certain industries. So IoT is going to have even deeper impact in a space like oil and gas.
I think maybe one advice for Philip, who posted the question, try to get someone on your side, either an advisor, or you bring on a team member that has experience directly in that industry, and have them be kind of your devil's advocate, but on your side, and help open the doors and understand the problems in a lot of detail. And a lot of industry experts are open to taking on advising or mentorship roles. And I would just try to find out who's the right person that can help me get to the place where I need to be, and try to get them on your boat. And they will already ask you a lot of questions about how things could be different. Or actually, I think the best thing you can ask for is what are the 5 things you think this will never work in your industry, and then you just tackle those things and convince the industry that it really works, and demonstrate that.
Okay, and by the way, audience, if you have questions, type them in the Q&A box, not the chat box. So here's a question about smart city digital twins, and digital twin, I think what they mean is the virtual model of a city that technologists might use, or a replica of the physical world. So I don't know what they mean by this. Where is the action? But can you comment on the idea of digital twins? We talked a lot about smart cities.
So I can take a quick stab at it, and others can jump in as required. So on digital twins, I think visualization definitely is one part of it. But I think the true value of digital twin, at least the way we see and way we evaluate the solution, is, are you then able to kind of overlay it with operational data and then run simulations on that operational data? Let's say if you're changing certain amount of variables, how does my output change? So when we're talking about digital twins, I think there are many startups which are working on the visualization piece. A couple of them have gone on to kind of overlay or integrate other data sources, both structured and unstructured, and now making the digital twin more kind of a replica of the real world. I think the true value kind of sees true value when you start running simulations, and before making any change in the real environment, if you can see, okay, if I change certain things on my digital twin by moving certain variables, what other impacts are created, whether in the environment, my output, my asset life, and so many other things. So I think if that journey is complete, then there is really significant value in digital twin solutions across multiple verticals, including manufacturing. I think automotive as a vertical has been looking at digital twin solution quite aggressively. Construction industry has been looking at digital twin solution quite actively. So I think that there is a lot of opportunity for such startups which are looking at creating a full solution and have a vertical focus again to kind of go deep with simulation and introducing certain models which help the customer.
Any other comments on that?
No, I think Udit covered it pretty well.
Okay. Well, we've only got 1 minute left, so I'm hesitant to take any more questions. I want to remind the audience that if you want to contact the panelists, I'm sure they'll answer your questions. This presentation has been recorded. And it is going to be available online. And Rob is going to share the links with you afterwards. But before we go, I would like to ask each panelist if you could just let the audience know how they can get a hold of you. I'm going to go ahead and post my LinkedIn profile, but you don't have to do that. But so, Carolyn, how does someone get a hold of you if they want to talk further?
Yeah, you can reach me directly at carolyn@bluebearcap.com, or I will also post my LinkedIn here in a second if I make it quickly.
Okay, well, while you're doing that, Sanjit, how does someone get a hold of you? Oh, there it is. You already posted it. You're a step ahead of me. All right, and Udit? How do people get a hold of you, Udit? Udit, are you there?
It was a little choppy, so I couldn't hear you. So yeah, if you want to, hello?
Yeah, oh, there you go. You posted your email address. Okay, great.
Yeah, my connection was a bit choppy, so couldn't hear you. So I've posted my email address. People can reach out to me directly. You can also find me on LinkedIn with my first name and last name. So happy to connect on LinkedIn or via email.
All right, well, that's it then. I want to thank our panelists. That was actually a really informative, good discussion. I learned a lot, as I always do. Thank you, audience. We had an awfully smart audience here today. They asked a lot of good questions. And thank you, IDEA IPO, for being the host, the sponsor, and facilitator of this. I'm Roger Royce. I am a partner with the law firm of Haynes & Boone in Palo Alto, California, and I'm going to now hand it back to you, Rob.
That was an awesome panel discussion. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Sanjit. Thank you, Udit, for spending time with us and sharing your expertise. Audience members, thanks for tuning in and asking great questions. Roger, thanks for moderating. See you next time.